This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me. And today I'm joined again by lovely Arthur Parkinson, which is such a treat. And we're doing a theme, the two of us, on sort of low fuss gardening. And we did a perennial self-seeders and spreaders. And today we thought we would do low fuss perennials, which obviously is linked, but it could be perennials into even shrubs. And then we're going to finish with self-seeding annuals. So the three different subjects really of a self-perpetuating, self-seeding, low maintenance, utterly beautiful, magical garden. Welcome, Arthur. How are you?
Fine. I like that description.
Yeah, dream on. No. Gardening does need a bit of gardening. That's
and
the
a lot
thing.
of magic, a lot of fantasy.
A lot of fantasy. So this episode is on low fuss perennials with maybe the odd shrub, as I say. I kind of was thinking maybe ideally they don't need staking. Ideally, they don't need endless deadheading. And ideally, they are reliable, long performers. And so I guess that was sort of the criteria that I set us both. And so maybe you would start off, Arthur, which, I mean, actually your first one is a shrub, isn't it?
It is.
But why don't you kick off?
Well, this choice, I mentioned this to my mum and she told me a story how she planted this plant as one of her first plants in her little garden and she took it out because it did actually take over the garden. It's the Staghorn, the Rifus typhina.
Yes.
I think that's how I pronounce it. Probably pronounced it terribly incorrect.
Isn't it Rus?
Rus typhina.
Yes,
yeah.
Rus. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's true. I don't know why I think it may be Australian, but I'm not sure if that's true either. But it carries nice memories for me as a forager because you'll see it planted in the most common, really spreading varieties in car parks, supermarket car parks, banks.
Yes.
You might even...
Yeah, like bud
Yeah,
here.
you possibly will see it as an escapee along the train line. But from, September onwards, it just becomes this really burning bush, like, something out of a Greek mythology kind of thing. And I've foraged it for you actually many times when we've done array days. I remember, it's kind of thing, if I see it growing outside the co-op in a tangle, neglected shrubbery and the leaves haven't been frosted, it's well worth picking for a few days because it's so exotic. But I was in St. James's Park a few months ago and I saw the most incredible blazon. It was literally like the embers of a fire within this bed. And it was a variety called Tiger's Eye, I think it's called. Just going to check that. Yeah, Tiger Eye, Bali Tiger. And it wasn't like the cheapest chips one that they obviously use in car park planting schemes. It had a much more delicate acer-like leaf, really fine little tooth leaves. And it was honestly the most incredible autumn colour. And it wasn't huge either. It was much lower. And I thought of you. I thought, gosh, I bet Sarah's tried to plant this in the Oast garden because I bet when you were first doing the choices for the Oast garden, these shrubs were...
Well, I think it's such a good tip.
But it is a spreader. I mean, even in St. James's Park, I could see lots of little spurs coming up. And I thought, I bet they have to be careful with this because I bet even though it's a cultivated variety, it still wants to run. It's a runner, isn't it? It sends out by the roots.
So, funnily enough, it was one of the few plants that was here when we arrived here in the garden. And I think that's because it is such a sort of doer. And I, just like you, I was so thankful to it because it meant I could go and pick a big vase of it and have it as a kind of autumn centerpiece in our kitchen. And so I was really happy with it. But I have to admit that we did end up controlling it. There's still one there, but what we found is it's on the base of a wall and the roots were going in under the wall and it was sort of slightly disrupting the foundations because we were allowing it to just do what it wanted. But now it's controlled. It's wonderful. And I bet, like Alstroemeria, they've done modern breeding of varieties that don't do that so much. So I'm going to really look out for that variety.
Yeah.
I think we'll put it in the podcast notes, but I think that sounds like a really lovely thing.
And I've seen photos of them in pots, so I think for big pots they're quite a good choice too, if you want that jungly look. Because obviously, as you've said, if they're going to cope well at the base of a wall, they're going to cope well in a pot, because it shows that they're happy to be restricted, a bit like a fig. So
absolutely. So I mean, I'm going to take that on to Alstroes actually, which are on my list. I mean, they're a funny plant, aren't they? People are so snobby about them because they are. Yeah, do you hate them?
No, I adore them, but people, it's if you daren't mention that you are a fan of them.
No. Yeah. And it is interesting because I pick them sometimes to take as a bunch of flowers to a friend, and they're like, oh, Alstroemerias. Like, no, I'm going to give you a lecture about how good Alstroemerias are. So don't be so snobby about it. And the reason they're good, of course, is that like chrysanthemums that I'm surrounded by right now, they have the most incredible vase life. So I can do a big arrangement in my house, or 2 or 3 if I've got time, on a Saturday morning, and I'm looking at that the following Saturday morning, and even the Saturday morning after it, and I might need to take it out of the vase, cut the stem ends, refresh the water, perhaps put some vinegar in to stop the stems getting a bit manky. But Alstroemerias, that's why they are in the garage forecourt wrap, because they are so reliable. And with modern breeding, there are 2 or 3 things that have been really improved. Because in my parents' garden when I was a child, that's one of the reasons I love them, they grew all the way down the path to our front door, and they were quite short flowering and they were runners. But with modern varieties, they now flower, I genuinely can promise, some of them for 5-6 months, and I'll tell you which. But also they don't run, they don't take over a whole bed. And in my parents' garden, I remember they were almost like bindweed. You know, they had these sort of almost thick spaghetti roots that just went, it was under standard roses that were trained as standards. And they were wonderful for a short period of time. But then you couldn't plant anything below those roses because there was an absolute mat of these roots. But with modern breeding, they don't do that anymore. In my parents' garden, they were called the Lig2 hybrids, but they don't do that anymore. And they flower for, months upon months upon months. So there are 3 that I'm particularly obsessed with for low-fuss perennial gardening. And the first one is Blushing Bride. And I've got the absolute joy at the moment of going back over 30 years of picture galleries that I've been shooting with Jonathan Buckley. And I thought this was a new hybrid, but I saw only yesterday in a gallery from 15 years ago that we first trialled Blushing Bride 15 years ago. Anyway, I forgot about it, and it's re-entered our life as a container plant, and I've got it next to the Abelia on our doorstep on the south face of the farmhouse. And genuinely, I've got a photograph of that looking fabulous in May with the tulips and still looking fabulous right the way through until early November, certainly late October with the dahlias. So it's just brilliant. It's a pale sort of white with a wash of green and pink over it, and it's just superb. And then I know everybody loves to hate yellow, but there's a very, very gentle yellow variety that's like the colour of a primrose with nice flecks over it called Friendship. And I'd have to recommend that too. And we have that in the perennial cutting garden. And you pull that like rhubarb. You always pull it, not cut it, because it promotes more stem development below soil level. And then the final one that I know loads of people have in their gardens because it flowers for such a long time and is such a trendy colour is Indian Summer, which has crimson leaves and orange flamey, almost like the colour of a bonfire colour flowers. And so those, Blushing Bride, Friendship and Indian Summer. But if I was only to choose one, it would be Blushing Bride. It's just sensational.
And you have to pull them, don't you, when you're picking them?
Exactly. That's the really important thing. Yeah, exactly. So over to you.
Yeah. So I ordered this from you this summer, actually. It's a type of Michaelmas daisy called Calliope. Is that the right pronunciation?
Oh, I don't know it, Arthur. So I must have trialled it here.
I remember seeing it at Perch Hill because it was so big that you had to do a silver birch cage around it. But I think Josie might have taken them out because I think at the time florists weren't picking them.
That's
Yeah.
it. So it's an aster.
Yeah, an aster.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I do love them because they are kind of very much fairy tale. They're the kind of perennial that will take over a garden once the gardener's left.
Yeah, it's so
and
true.
I remember my Nana Min, she used to try and weed out the horrible, like, muted pinks and just leave the lovely purple deep ones, because you do get a very mixed watercolour palette of them. But actually, you know what? There was one year when my dad had moved into her garden and the garden hadn't been done. And so the asters had just gone crazy. And it was so beautiful. I'd got these lavender Pekin hens at the time, which were all blue and lilac, and plodding around these forests of asters. And they go on and on and on until there's the hard frost, don't they? And they just give the garden such structure. So I would say, you know, if you want a lazy garden, don't be afraid of them. Let them do what they want and go everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think with modern breeding as well, they've got rid of the tendency a little bit. Some varieties used to get mildew in the summer, but the new ones have been bred not to be really resistant to that. So even in this super hot summer that we had, ours didn't get mildew. So I do think that is one of the good things that modern breeding has done, is really make things more resistant. Although I have to say, if you'd asked me a year ago to do low-fuss perennials, I would have to have put a phlox in there, and it would probably be Phlox David. And I'm afraid we've actually just taken out our line of phlox in the perennial cutting garden, because we find with our drier, hotter summers, even with watering at the roots, our Phlox David, which was meant to be mildew resistant, but because it's under strain in July and August, you know, because that's when it flowers, that's what we do find, that does tend to get mildew now, which is just such a shame. I mean, I don't know if any of you have got any tips about that, but we've ended up taking that out, and we're going to retrial it in shade in a sort of moister situation. But in the full sunny open beds in the perennial cutting garden, it hasn't done so well. Anyway, that's a negative, but lovely your aster idea, Arthur. I totally agree. They've got some real sort of Beatrix Potter old-fashioned feel about them.
I don't think I do like them actually in the vase. I think they are quite difficult in the vase. I think they can make things look a bit too old-fashioned sometimes. But I'm sure, you know, with the newer varieties, I just remember that particularly really tall one that wasn't... I mean, you can get some dreadful dumpy ones, a bit like you're mentioning of the Alstroemerias. You know, the modern breeding has created beautiful ones, but a lot of the ones you'll find in the market plant stalls are just horrible, dumpy, short ones. So don't go for them. Do look at the varieties. Go for height and animation rather than dumpiness. Yeah.
So my next kind of family, in a way, but one particular variety I'm going to mention are the Achilles as low-fuss perennials. They don't need staking. I mean, the taller ones, like terracotta, does get quite tall. So I might put some canes and some string around a big clump of that, but only in a windy spot. And the thing that I find with them is that they age with elegance. So even as they're going over, their big plateau flowers really almost dry in the garden and retain some colour. And we've just had one on trial here in a gravel area, really well drained, at the top of the rose garden before you go down the steps into the roses, called Firefly Peach Sky. And it's outside my writing room, and I have picked that every week, every couple of weeks, since I would say May, and I picked the last bunch a couple of weeks ago. And what we find is by me picking it or it being dead-headed, again, right down to the base, we find that just reflowers and reflowers and reflowers. And the flowers emerge this rather lovely, gentle peach, which is a colour Josie and I, the head gardener here, never quite agree about, because she rather hates it and thinks of it as a bit too sweety sweet. And I've rather come round to it because I think it's so nice and floristry. But anyway, it comes out a sort of peachy colour and then it gradually fades to white. And so on the plant at any one time, you've got that mix of colours, and it's elegant. It's quite short. It's much shorter than any we've trialled here before. I mean, I would say it's 30 to 40 centimetres. So we're going to try it in a pot next year. And that's a brand new variety that I've been really impressed by it as being very long flowering, very low maintenance, and lovely both in the garden and the vase.
They're good in pots as well, aren't they? Quite
really
drought
good.
Tolerant. And I bought them for my brother Lyndon to plant into his lawn because he wanted a wildflower type area. And
lovely.
Of course, you know, impatient people. So I said, right, well, buy these and buy those. And they can cope with being mowed over quite well, can't they, I think?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's Yarrow, isn't it?
Yeah. So, they'll all jazz up your lawn, have them in your wildflower areas.
Great. Over to you.
So this is a bit of an old hat one, really, because we mention it every time we talk about roses. But I have to say, of all the salvias, Natch, TV Lindage and Emsis, it is the best one I find for pots. I mean, I just love it. And I've grown quite a few of that family now, the little sage leaf salvias. There's so many available. But I find this one, if you want something to echo kind of a lavender head shape, very quickly, that's the one to have. So my mum's got this at the edge of her front garden, and it acts like the entrance to the garden in a dolly tub. And it must be getting on for 8 years old now, this salvia. And it's just become like a lovely dome of foliage, and it starts to flower from kind of end of April, first week of May it will start. And then we just give it a haircut in end of June. And then it has a second flush right the way now. And it's, in a town, so microclimate, it will keep flowering until there's a really hard frost. And to my nose, it smells of that lovely blackcurrant pepper fragrance. Some people say it smells of something else, but I like the blackcurrant flavour. So for me, it's the best salvia for a pot, but also for planting under your roses as well. And if you like that dark purple Cadbury chocolate wrapper purple, it's just fantastic. And the bees love it. They've learned how to rob the nectar, so the big fat bumblebees land on the little delicate flowers and they rob through the corolla tubes. So it's wonderful to watch. It's a very good biodiversity plant for children to watch, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So it's I think, it's a Dutch or German name, Nachtlinde. Salvia Nachtlinde. And I think it means, and I'm sorry, I will need to be corrected, it either means night light or night butterfly, but I think by the sound of it, it might mean night light. And I think it's because it is such a luscious sort of nightish colour, but yet it's also got light in it. And so I think it's quite a good naming of it in a way. Salvia Nachtlinde, but it's in the Gemensis lot, isn't it? Exactly. So my next one, we actually have in this gravel area, very freely drained area, with the Achillea that I was just talking about, Firefly Peach Sky, is a variety of Erigeron. So neither of us have talked about Erigeron covinscianus, which of course is the most incredible self-seeding perennial that we have in the paths and steps all through the garden here. But I'm going to talk about Wayne Roderick. And I just want to just tell a tiny little story about it and why I got into it, which is that we used to, in the winter, sometimes Adam and I would go for a couple of weeks writing at Whitstable. And it's a wonderful place, famous for its oysters. And we would hire an Airbnb. And then we've got dogs, so we would walk all the way along the beachfront. And it's a shingle beach. But the houses all the way along there, I always really look at their gardens because things get blasted by salt winds, basically. You've got to be a pretty hardy, tough old thing to survive. And we were there in December 2 or 3 years ago, and Erigeron Wayne Roderick was in lots of people's front gardens, both in pots, so in containers, but also in sort of gravelly areas. And I thought, I'm not sure. So it's a daisy in a mauve colour, but it's got a big flower. It's kind of the size of a 2p piece or bigger. Do you still get 2p pieces? Probably not. But anyway, and...
Made me think now.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm not sure I bond with that, but I'm going to try it because it just looks like such a doer. So we put it in this gravel area with Firefly Peach Sky Achillea, and I have loved it. And actually, Tom Stimpson, who does the podcast with me sometimes, who's our head of horticulture, he and I were putting together a perennial collection that was very low maintenance. And we've combined the Achillea, Firefly Peach Sky, with Erigeron Wayne Roderick and Agara. And I had it on my desk or next to my desk on these shelves. And again, I'm not exaggerating. It lasted 10 days or 2 weeks in the vase. But then I just go out. So I've got these little bottles on my desk. And I just go out every 10 days. I change the water. I pick some more and I put them back in these little bottles. And it really sustains me, that combination. So Erigeron Wayne Roderick. So if you want a tough, no maintenance plant and you want to pick the odd stem from it, I couldn't more recommend it.
No, it's a cheerful little thing, and it's beautiful lilac, isn't it? Like dowdy Earl Grey purple.
Exactly. Very trendy colour at the moment, of course. Good. You next?
Well, I'm interested to see what you think of me mentioning this family of plants, because famously you say not to bother planting them, but I know you've got a very beautiful row of them at Perch Hill, and it's peonies. Because yesterday I had that awful thing of going to someone's house and, you know, when they say, can you do a flower arrangement, and you kind of run out of flowers that you've bought, taken for a job, and you go into their garden and all there was peony foliage. But I have to say it was beautiful. And of course, you are okay at this time of year to pick it in the autumn. It's not going to affect next year's flowering. And I do actually love them if you can, you know, stomach the amount of space they demand to take up. And I have to, the only thing at Chelsea that really made my heart sing was this stand of peonies. I think it was Claire Austin who brought her collection into the Grand Pavilion, and they've been done so beautifully. And I mean, I love the dark varieties, Buckle-Eye Bell, and Lord Alfred Kitchener is the one my mum's got in her garden. But there's lots of ones, isn't there? But I hope you've finally had a year where Jonathan's either been able to photograph your peonies or you've been at home to pick them, because I know famously you always say, I'm never at home, and they never get photographed because Jonathan comes and it's the wrong light, or they're inboard, or they've gone over.
I mean, I totally agree. I think if you've got a big garden and you've got space, of course, they're perfect for what we're talking about, low fuss perennials. There's no denying it, because they've got beautiful foliage. In the spring it comes up, you know, really sort of red, flame red, and then they do flower. Admittedly, I would say rather transient flowers, but then they do have this wonderful colouring. I mean, you know, it goes from sort of coral to scarlet, and so they're almost like the Ornamental family. You know, they have wonderful autumn colour. So I agree. In a low maintenance garden, if you've got plenty of space, good peonies. And I do love the one Duchesse de Nemours, because it smells of lily of the valley crossed with roses. I mean, I remember putting my nose in that about 40 years ago and thinking, I've gone to heaven. I mean, this is just the most incredible perfume. So it is worth looking out for ones that have scent. So if you're at Chelsea selecting them, put your nose in one before you buy, because, you know, they really are incredible for fragrance if you get the right varieties.
And they're quite chicken resistant as well.
That's a good tip.
Yeah, they're very thuggy once they get going. So with bantams, so they're good. Was that the variety that you grew up with? Because your dad must have liked peonies.
Yeah, exactly. And my family, my mother still has her garden, and she has a lot of peonies. I mean, it's very much a sort of mid-May to mid-June garden. You know, she has things like wisteria and bearded iris and peonies and ancuses and things, and it's absolutely wonderful. But the flowers, it's at the peak then for sure. So my next family would have to be the hardy geraniums, which, funnily enough, have sort of, they come in and out of fashion a bit, I think. But I'm working with a guy, Dominic Rose, who's the chairman of our Sarah Raven company, and he drew my attention to hardy geraniums and reminded me of them in a way, because, of course, they are incredibly low maintenance. And he's involved in community gardening in North London, and he does lots of gardening with kids. And I mean, you know, the good old one, Roseanne, has almost become a cliche, but oh my goodness, does that flower for a long time. And there's a new one called Bloom Me Away, which is rather similar, but a bit more sort of ground covery. Again, that sort of purpley, bluey colour. But there are so many, aren't there? I mean, I was brought up in my parents' garden with Silostemon, which is Pilostemon. And then there's a new one, Anne Focard, which is that real magenta. But we're going to do a trial of hardy geraniums next sort of spring into summer, because I think they're due a renaissance. I think they've got the sort of association of being a bit old-fashioned, but they are extremely low-fuss perennials. And if you cut them back, just like we discussed with Alchemilla and various other things in a previous episode, they come back again just as good for a second flush or even a third flush. So I think we would have to mention those in this list.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I hope you trial a few in pots too.
Yes.
Because in the pots, you don't tend to cut them back hard like you would in a herbaceous border. If you can resist that and let them become kind of nesty in the base.
Yeah.
There's a garden around the corner and they've got, I think it must be Roseanne, in a big concrete urn.
Yeah.
And it's just like a big wig of the stuff. It's wonderful.
Lovely, lovely. So over to you.
Echinoptera. Can't not mention globe thistles, which I don't think you grow, do you? You don't. You've not traditionally liked them.
We used to have them in the Oast garden. And again, you know, I've got to put them back because they're so good for late in the year, aren't they?
Yeah, and I just remember being little and seeing these disco balls on stems covered in bumblebees. Like you can sometimes get 9 bumblebees all on them.
Yeah.
And very good, very, very drought tolerant too, very good foliage. And again, you know, if you think a lot of people leave them for winter interest, but I would say if you cut them right back after they've done the first flowering, they will give you a second flush.
Great.
As we've described, cutting back a lot of things hard to the ground. Particularly if they're in rich soil, they do quickly get back going. And so you will have, they could even be flowering for, you know, September again, if you cut them really hard back after the first flush.
Yeah, good. And that links me to my next one. And we're sort of drawing to a close now. But I think the Hyssop family are fantastic. They're easy to grow from seed, perennials, first year flowering perennials. We had a variety in a container, a huge container here, in our new gravel garden called Beelicious. And it's a bit of a naff name. But anyway, the truth is the bees did find it delicious. And I try and do a head count of bees, I don't know, once a month or so, walk around and just sit, get a chair and sit in an area of the garden and just watch where the bees are most active. And just like you said about the hummingbird hawk moth, you know, I think bees, similarly, it's really good to just notice where they're travelling to. And with us, no doubt, in July, August, September, it was this Hyssop Beelicious. Once the alliums were over, that was the plant that they were really seeking out. And it flowered and flowered. I mean, we've only just cut it back and we're now towards the end of autumn. Yeah, I think the whole Hyssop family, or, you know, their Latin name is the Agastache family. And yeah, I'm crazy about them. And you do need good drainage, I think. So either in a pot or for us, they need to be in the sort of gravelly garden area or sort of around steps in our gravelly bits, because they don't love our rich clay soil, rather like hollyhocks or whatever. But Agastache, the Hyssops are fantastic. And there's lots of interesting new breeding going on with them at the moment.
Do you mulch them?
No.
If they're in the ground, you don't mulch them?
No, I don't. I think not. I think they really need, you know, almost more treating like a bearded iris. Not as much as that, but I think they need that good sort of Mediterranean baking to do well. And the trouble with mulching is it will cover their roots. And obviously they're not getting much sun and light in the winter time, but I would be a bit wary of mulching them, I think.
I was put off them a few years ago because I remember buying lots and lost them all in the winters, but obviously they're in the wrong place. So I should try them again and have them in pots, maybe.
They are like those echinaceas that we were all flogged about 5 years ago, where we were told they were perennials. And with us, they did 1 or 2 years, but they then disappeared. But I think, well, we'll see, because we've only had Beelicious for the first time.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, but it'd be interesting to see in the right place whether we can perennialise it. So your last one, Arthur?
Very last one, and I know it is so old hat, but I think it's nice actually to go back to old hat things, particularly with climate change. Japanese anemones.
Yeah, lovely.
And me and my grandma Sheila, every fortnight or so, we have kind of a spat with my mum, because my mum hates them.
Right.
She sees them as thuggish, boring things. But me and Sheila say, well, what else are you going to plant under the magnolia? Because there's nothing else that's going to thrive there, and it's just going to be me that then has to weed that whole area. And we love them because, you know, we haven't all got time to grow cosmos, but for me, they are a perennial cosmos. They don't, of course, flower as early as an annual cosmos does, but they do give you that beautiful, similar flower shape in late summer, autumn. And I just love them. There's so many different varieties, and they're not too bad in the vase, actually, if you see them, I find. And they're very elegant. And then if you don't pick them, if you just let them flower in the garden, you get these lovely seed heads that on a windy day burst out like candy floss. So they're fun. And there's a lot of different varieties. I mean, unfortunately, I can't think what the old varieties are, but, you know, you inherit them. And they just, if they're happy where they are, they will just form a colony of leaf. You cut them back hard, you know, in late spring, and up comes the fresh leaves. And you can get bulbs amongst them. They're not completely impenetrable. You can get a bulb planter through a glade of them. So you could have lovely tulips coming through the leaves if you want. But they're very useful to me, and I like them.
Honorine Joubert is an old-fashioned one, isn't it? I think that's the pure white. But there are so many good ones now. There are sort of semi-doubles, fully doubles that go on flowering longer. No, I agree. And of course, they take shade, just like you say, under the magnolia. So we have them in the north-facing border here on the edge of the school with the shade-tolerant acanthus called rue leaden. then the lovely sarcococca, which is starting to begin to flower now and perfume the whole place. But I think Japanese anemones in the right place are absolutely brilliant. They will run, but, you know, with new varieties, again, you will find ones that are better behaved if you've got a small garden. So my final one, I thought, would have to be a grass. And to be honest, I couldn't decide, you know, an ornamental grass. I couldn't decide which, because you and I both love Casmanthium latifolium, the
we do.
Northern Oats grass, which is so lovely. But do you know what? It is very late flowering. So it's only just coming up to flower now. And it does take 2 or 3 years, really, for a clump to get established and then flower well. So I think I take my hat off now to Pennisetum ponytails, which is said not to be hardy, but has overwintered with us, the 3rd winter running. So this is its 4th year here. And you grow it from seed and it clumps up really quickly. And what's great about it is you've got these great tussocks in spring, and then you get these ponytail-like spears, almost like a really, really mini, much more delicate pampas grass, but not that sort of 1970s swingers classic plant. They're really upright and they get to 6 or 7 foot. And so whereas in the farmhouse garden here, which is backlit early in the day, we have Euphorbia crachus wolfenii to give that sort of backlit sort of airiness to the garden, and the ups and downs and the undulations. That does really from sort of February until June, but then we cut it back a bit. And then Pennisetum ponytails takes over and you get the same airiness. So we've had 2 clumps of it in the farmhouse garden this year, but Josie and I are just talking about we're going to grow lots more of it and have regular tussocks of that to be the rhythm plant, the punctuation plant, all the way through from our bedroom window and our kitchen all the way through the garden so that it's backlit. So that would be my final one. Very easy to grow, very low maintenance. Haven't found it to be invasive yet, but I've only had it for a few years. But yeah.
What time of year does Josie cut it back, Sarah?
So, I mean, we haven't yet. So we're getting to the end of autumn now. The wind often will cut it back in the end. Right. And then you just neaten up the evergreen dome. And, you know, rather like Steepa gigantea, it's another fantastic grass, isn't it? But I nearly put that in, and then I thought we've talked about that in previous episodes, so I really wanted to sort of select a new one.
Nice to have a new one.
Yeah.
It's not too tumbleweedy.
No, and you can grow it from seed, so it's cheap as chips.
Great.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Arthur. Another lovely episode, I would say. I hope you've all enjoyed listening, and join us again for Self-Seeding Annuals. Thanks for listening to Grow Cookie to Range with Sarah Raven and Arthur Parkinson. And next week, Arthur is joining me again, and we're going to do our 12 favourite plants from the annual and biennial brigade that self-seed, so that are really low maintenance. You put them in the garden once and they'll still be coming up. Not them, but their babies or their grandchildren or their great-great-grandchildren for decades to come. So hope to see you then. You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.